Hello, everybody. Recording live from somewhere.
Welcome back to another edition of the At Odds MMA show, everyone. I believe this is episode 33 now. It's hard to imagine that the show has been around this long. I am your host, as always, Brad Taschuk, and I am joined on the line once again by my co-host, Gabe Killian. Gabe, how you doing today?
Great, man. How you doing? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too. And yeah, we haven't spoken since the New Year, so the last thing we did was the year-end betting special. If anybody hasn't checked that out yet, it's archived on iTunes, Stitcher, and MMAoddsbreaker.com, so go check that out. How was your New Year, Gabe?
Pretty great, man. Went down to a comedy club, had a great time.
Nice. Glad to hear it. It's always good when you do something cool over New Year's, although for the last couple of years I just really haven't cared anymore. The biggest thing for me is that the following day is a day off from work, so that day off for me is more important than really going out and celebrating, but I'm getting old, I guess.
Yeah, I haven't really cared much for most holidays for the past few years.
Yeah, it's, after you do them 20 or so times and it starts to, I'm 28 now, so when it starts to get towards 30 times, it gets pretty repetitive, but, it's always good to see family, hang out with old friends, stuff like that, so yeah. That's the best part of it to me.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, we do have a bit to talk about today, as we are actually going to be previewing UFC Fight Night 35. I think this is going to be one of the earliest previews that we've done because just with this card being on a Wednesday, it's kind of weird to get all the scheduling done. But before we get into that, we're going to talk a little bit about Fight Night 34, UFC Singapore. And really because the card wasn't the greatest card in the world, there were obviously some bright spots. The Safadine Lim fight, that ended up being very good. I don't think it's going to be a fight of the year contender or anything like that by the end of the year, but very entertaining. But looking at this card, we know that there were some fights that really weren't UFC caliber fights. So let's talk about the guys that were. Who was your most impressive performance on Fight Night 34, Gabe?
Russell Doan coming through as an underdog against Leandro Brodinho Issa, submitting the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, was very impressive.
Yeah, that was very impressive. I'm not sure if the listeners were able to check it out, but we had all of the staff picks up for the Fight Night 34 card, and that's going to be something that we're going to be doing moving forward. And Gabe, myself, and I believe either Adam or James were the only people to pick Russell Doan, so it was a split in terms of the picks, but I really thought that if Doan was going to win this fight, it was going to be keeping it on the feet, being the better striker, which he was. I didn't in my wildest dreams imagine that he was going to put Issa to sleep with a triangle. Obviously Issa was hurt going into the triangle, but even still, very, very impressive stuff by Russell Doan, and an impressive night all around for the 808 fight team. They went 3-0 on the night, and they've actually got somebody coming up on Fight Night 35 here as well, so maybe they can keep that streak rolling.
Who's on this card?
Luis Smolka, the guy who's taking on Alp Ozkilic, is from the same team, so he's teammates with Doan, Dustin Kimura, and Max Holloway. So going to be interesting to see how he fares this time out.
Nice.
And in terms of my most impressive performance, it's a little bit of a nostalgic one because, it's been a long time that I've been watching MMA now. When I first started watching MMA, this guy was one of the top lightweights, and he's just always been sort of near the top of divisions, but not right at the top. That's Tatsuya Kawajiri. Obviously, he was one of the best lightweights over in Japan for a very long time, dropped to featherweight, and has had a bit of success there as well. And he looked very impressive against Sean Soriano. And, he struggled to get takedowns a little bit early, but once he figured out some old tricks that he had to get Soriano to the ground, he ended up doing very well. He's one of the best guard passers, ground and pounders, and submission guys in MMA once he gets that fight down there. So, very, very impressive by Tatsuya Kawajiri, and hopefully Crusher can keep doing big things in the UFC. So we'll look forward to seeing what he's up to next. I think he's actually been asking for a bit of a quick turnaround. One other thing that I wanted to... Oh, go ahead, Gabe.
I was just going to say I had myself accidentally on mute for like the past couple minutes.
Well, I heard you fine when you were talking about Doan, so if there was anything you wanted to add after that, feel free to jump in.
Well, I said a few things, but then I realized I was on mute, but nothing important, so we can keep rolling.
All right, we'll move right along then. One of the other things that was obviously a story coming out of Fight Night 34 was UFC Fight Pass. This was really the debut event. Fight Pass had been out for a few days or a week or so prior to this event actually going down. What was your impression of Fight Pass, and what has it been so far, Gabe?
Well, I really like the live fights aspect of it, especially when they're live from wherever the fights are overseas, and so you stay up like for me the prelims started at 3 a.m. I kind of dug staying up at 3 a.m. It was kind of like if you're a World Cup fan. A lot of times you gotta stay up late to watch games, you know. So I kind of like that aspect of it. It made me feel like a more a world, you know, it's a more grown, more worldly sport. Yeah, I really like that aspect of it. But what I don't like is the amount of fight videos. It's very limited. I think UFC, the TV had way more fight videos like a couple years ago.
Yeah, I remember the old UFC vaults or whatever it was called at the time, when they first came out with this whole idea of, you know, giving fans access to fights with a free trial, or I think I had a paid subscription to that for 3 months or 6 months or something like that. But I do remember the old vault that they had, and it seemed like you could get everything at that point. And, you know, one of the big talking points and selling points of Fight Pass was we're going to have all the UFC fights, all the Pride fights, all the Strikeforce, WEC, and so on down the line. And that's something that, you know, we've heard pretty much everybody say this so far, but it just feels rushed because all of that stuff's not there. So hopefully that gets added to Fight Pass. But in terms of the live experience, the stream was great. I didn't have any problems. One of the things that I really dislike about the archive videos is that when you're in full screen, you don't get the little menu buttons at the bottom. They don't disappear, so you're not really in full screen, but they fixed that for the live stream, so it seems like they are making progress on Fight Pass. You know, it's probably something that, being the hardcore MMA fan that I am, I'm gonna end up buying anyways, but you know, I certainly hope that it improves and continue to take suggestions from fans and not just disregards criticisms that we might have.
Yeah, definitely.
Moving on to UFC Fight Night 35, which is coming up. This one isn't going to be on Fight Pass except for the very first two prelims. It's taking place from Duluth, Georgia, and the headliner for this card is Luke Rockhold taking on Costa Philippou. So a couple of top 10 ranked middleweights there. And there are actually quite a few middleweight fights throughout this card. I believe there's 3 on the main cards and another 1 on the undercard. So they seem to be doing this lately where they cater cards more towards one weight class. I guess it makes it easier for injury replacements and things like that to happen. But I kind of like this new setup that they've got going on. So we did have the full lines come out a little bit earlier today for Fight Night 35. So Gabe and I are going to go through, break down the fights for you, and if we've got any bets or leans at this point, then we'll give those out. But also make sure to follow us on Twitter. I am at Brad Taschuk, and Gabe is at Gabe Killian MMA. Correct, Gabe?
Yep.
Perfect. Just to make sure that, we finalize those plays or what we're actually going through with on the card. And obviously Gabe also has all of his fight pick articles up on MMA Oddsbreaker as well. So the first fight of the evening this one is going to be on the UFC Fight Pass, is a flyweight bout between Alp Oskilic and the aforementioned Louis Smolka.
Actually, there's been a shake-up since a shake-up on the card. Now the first fight is Charlie Brenneman against Beneil Dariush, and Alpek and Oskilic is opening up the Fox Sports 1 prelims. And John Moraga versus Dustin Ortiz has been moved from the prelims to the main card.
Oh. Where was it that you discovered this?
It's on the Wikipedia page, and it's reported on MMA Junkie too.
Okay, because what I always use is the MMA Junkie rumors page, and they've still got it listed as the original main card. So yeah, I noticed they didn't update it. Yeah, I would love to see if those flyweight fights end up on the main cards, because I'm sick of the flyweights getting buried on undercards for no good reason. So what we'll do is I just looking now, and I think I see the order that you're looking at. It looks like Fight Metric has the order that you're talking about there, with Brenneman and Dariush going through and opening up the card. So we'll get that all sorted out. And now I'm seeing that Gabe sent me over the link here to Wikipedia, and they've got it as Brenneman and Dariush, who are kicking off the preliminary card on Fight Pass as well. So I guess we'll start with that fight. Charlie Brenneman taking on Beneil Dariush, so it's still a UFC veteran taking on a UFC newcomer. Charlie Brenneman has a record of 19-5, and Beneil Dariush is 6-0 in his MMA career. Coincidentally, that's the same record that Smolka has as well. So this fight is going to be, as I said, at lightweight. Last time we saw Charlie Brenneman in the UFC, he was at 170. So obviously he's dropped down. He's actually had quite a bit of success, not only winning fights, but finishing fights outside of the UFC at 155. So hopefully he can bring some of that into the octagon with him. But in this matchup, I think that he's really going to have to revert to his old tactics, where he gets top control, moves around, maintains position, and really doesn't threaten to stop the fight all that much. And that's just because Dariush is a very, very skilled grappler. Obviously in MMA he's had some success getting submissions, but in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu competition he's been pretty outstanding in some of the videos that I've seen. So I do expect that Brenneman is going to be able to get takedowns here. He's probably going to win a decision based on top position. But Dariush is a little bit more of a threat than people are really giving him credit for. But that said, Brenneman he's come down from the original opening line of minus 245 all the way to minus 175 at this point, and Dariush is at plus 155. So there has been some support from the public, the betting public that is, for Beneil Dariush, and that Charlie Brenneman line, if it gets a whole lot lower than that, that could be something that you look to throw in a parlay, or if it gets too low, maybe even put a straight bet on it. So what's your take on this fight, Gabe?
Yeah, I'm not done watching the tape on Dariush yet, but so far I like Brenneman by decision also because of the superior grappling and his excellent submission defense. He's been up against really good submission artists before, and he's defended submissions and just grinded them out. And with the size advantage here, I think it could be a similar case. And it's worth noting that this fight was, Dariush was originally fighting Jason High at welterweight, out of his natural weight class, but since Brenneman replaced Jason High, they both agreed to fight at lightweight, which is their natural weight class.
Yeah, so a little bit of a change there for Dariush. Hopefully that doesn't throw off his camp. I don't imagine it would, as he probably just would have basically walked out of the gym and onto the scales at 170. So it's just going to be his regular weight cut to make it down to 155, I would suspect.
Yeah, pretty much.
Next fight that we've got on the Fight Pass prelims is another lightweight bout. This one is between Vince Pichel and Garrett Whiteley. And I have to say, before we get into the fight, whenever I see Vince Pichel's name, I always want to call him Vink, because who spells their name like that if it's Vince? I just don't get it. His parents did a poor job of naming him, that's all I'll say.
Yeah.
But this fight's another fairly interesting fight, and this features two guys who, they are pretty similar in terms of their styles. Both of these guys primarily want to keep it on the feet and land some hands. Both guys are 7-1 at this point in their MMA careers, and both of them do have the majority of their wins and their lone loss by TKO. So I do expect that there's probably going to be a finish in this fight. But looking at the lines here, Pichel is a minus 165 favorite, and Whiteley is a plus 145 underdog. So a little bit of action has come in on Pichel, but nothing significant at this point, since we're really only talking about half a day of line movement. In this fight, I do think that Pichel has the better chin. I think these guys are basically equal on the feet, but I also believe that Pichel is the better wrestler. So I don't think he's going to be able to hold Whiteley down, because he does have some good ability to get back to his feet, as he showed in his UFC debut. But I do think that Pichel might be able to push him up against the cage, get a takedown or two, and sort of score some points that way. But in the end, I think it's going to be that Pichel's got good power and a superior chin, and I think that's what's going to win him this fight. Your take, Gabe?
Yeah, I think this fight is going to be finished within a round and a half, and I'm leaning towards Vincent getting the finish.
And right now, just for the listeners out there, the under 1.5 is at plus 135. So if you are on the same track as Gabe and you think that this fight's going to end early, then there could be some money to be made in that spot.
Yep.
Moving up to the Fox Sports 1 prelims, we've got Alp Ozkilic taking on Luis Smolka. So coming into this fight, Ozkilic is 9-1, obviously 1-0 in the UFC with that win over Darren Uenoyama. And Luis Smolka is 6-0. The majority of his fights taking place over in PXC, which is one of the organizations that runs in Southeast Asia. I believe they're out of the Philippines, but I don't want to say that and then be wrong, so don't quote me on that one. But looking at this fight, we've got some of the more lopsided odds on the cards. Ozkilic is minus 270 as the favorite, and Smolka is plus 230 as an underdog. To be quite honest, I think that this line is pretty fair. Looking at some of the tape on Smolka, he's got some skills. The fact that he's 5'9", really long for a flyweight, does make it difficult for his opponents sometimes. But Ozkilic is the better striker here. He's the far better wrestler. So I think that he's going to be winning on points on the feet, and if he needs to take it down for whatever reason, he's going to be able to get down, get top position, and avoid whatever submissions that Smolka can throw up. So I do like Ozkilic. I'm probably going to be parlaying him with somebody later on the cards, but I haven't finalized that play quite yet, just because I'm waiting to see where some of the lines are going to be moving. Your thoughts on this one, Gabe?
Yeah, I personally haven't capped this fight yet. I still need to watch I already refreshed myself on Ozkilic, but I still have to watch the tape on Smolka. Yeah, this is the one fight I have no opinion on so far.
There you go. So make sure to keep an eye out for any articles or anything Gabe might have on this fight. But one thing that I noticed when I was going back and watching some tape on Ozkilic is that his only career loss came to Chico Camus. It was a very, very competitive fight. little bit earlier on in Oskilich's career. And in that fight, Oskilich actually looked bigger than Chico Camus. So I wouldn't be shocked if sometime in the future we see Camus move down to 125 as well, because, Alp isn't exactly a huge guy even at 125, so you would imagine that Camus would be able to make that cut pretty quickly.
Yeah.
That aside, moving on to our next fight, this is one of the middleweight bouts that I was talking about, and it is between Trevor Smith and Brian Houston. Trevor Smith came over from Strikeforce, put on a very, very good performance against Ed Herman in his UFC debut. He is 10-4 in his MMA career, and he is currently the minus 160 favorite here. Brian Houston, not such a good performance in his UFC debut. He got clipped with a head kick and then choked out by Derek Brunson in less than a minute. So, he had a little bit of hype, a little bit of support from the betting public going into that Brunson fight. But looking at him right now, he's got about the same line that he closed with there. I think he closed plus 160 in that fight, and he's plus 140 in this bout. So, personally, I think that this line is a little bit off. I think it should be either a pick'em or actually slightly in Brian Houston's favor. The reason for that is that Trevor Smith, he doesn't have good cardio, although it looked a little bit better against Ed Herman. I think that partly had to do with the fact that Herman was brutally gassed in that fight as well, so Smith just didn't look as tired as he normally does because the guy next to him was tired. Yeah. And then Smith's biggest asset is his ground game, except he doesn't have great wrestling. So Houston is a guy who can move around pretty well. He doesn't have the greatest wrestling, but I think his wrestling is good enough to keep this on the feet. And I think he's got better cardio than Trevor Smith. So I think that he's either going to pile up points by keeping it on the feet, being the much faster fighter, the better striker, and win a decision, or I think once Smith gets tired, he might be able to put some hands on him and get the stoppage here. So I actually like Brian Houston at plus 140 for the bet here. What are your thoughts, Gabe?
I'm leaning Trevor Smith, but the play I like is the fight to not go the distance.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good call. Right now, it's set at 1.5 for the over, so that's pretty hard to call because Trevor Smith has shown, well, he did show in the Ed Herman fight that he's got a pretty good chin, so it's hard to say if Houston's going to be able to put him out right away. But you have to think if Smith wins, it's probably going to be a submission pretty early on in the fight. If Houston wins, then it might go a little bit longer, but as you said, I do lean towards the stoppage, although I can see him getting a decision victory as well. Yeah. Next fight on the card is another lightweight fight. This one is between Isaac Valley Flag and Elias Silverio. And another, this isn't what you would necessarily call a great fight between two top-level fighters, but I think this is a pretty interesting fight. You've got Silverio, who's coming in with the unblemished record. He's 9-0 in his MMA career, and Valley Flag is 14-3-1. Obviously another guy who came over from Strikeforce, and he's a guy who I like because he cashed a plus 225 ticket for me against Yves Edwards back in his UFC debut. So I actually think that this is a pretty similar matchup as that Yves Edwards matchup. I think that Silverio is the better technical striker, but Isaac Valley Flag is going to be the guy who's pushing forward. He's going to have a whole lot more volume than Silverio. He might be able to push him up against the cage a little bit. Maybe get a takedown, although I don't really expect him to go for a takedown. And I just generally think that he is going to win this one on points. So I was hoping that I might be able to get an underdog price on Isaac Valley Flag, but as it sits right now, he's at minus 125. It sort of got me hemming and hawing, but I think at this price, I'm probably going to pass. If it gets a little bit closer to even, and definitely if it hits plus money, then I'll probably be making a play on Isaac Valley Flag. You agree with that, or are you going the other way on this one, Gabe?
I don't know, man. This one's really tough to call. So, so far, I have no idea which way I would go, but I do like the fight going to distance because, they're both pretty tough guys and not easy to finish. So that's the play I'm looking at. But yeah, I really couldn't personally get myself to lay money on either of these guys at this point.
There you go. Yeah, I definitely agree that no matter which way this is going, it's going to be a decision. Isaac Valley Flag, he's 35 years old, so maybe his chin's starting to fail, but we haven't really seen any evidence of that from his prior fights. So I'd expect even if Silverio connects that he'll be able to sort of power through that and end up taking this fight the distance, win or loss. And right now that over 2.5 is sitting at minus 190. So obviously it is expected that this fight is probably going to go to decision as well, but once that, the fight goes the distance prop comes out, might be a little bit cheaper, might be something that you can throw in a parlay, or even if you're comfortable with the over 2.5, that's not bad as well. There's, that can add some value to some other plays, so,
yeah,
a couple things to look at.
Minus 190 is worth it, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, next fight and the last fight that is on the Fox Sports 1 prelims is, again, more lightweights. So this card has 4 middleweight fights, 4 lightweight fights, very stacked in those divisions. And this one is between Ramsey Nijem, who brings in a 7-4 MMA record, and Justin Edwards, who brings in an 8-3 MMA record. Both of these guys, they've been sort of up and down in their UFC careers. Edwards has a 2-3 record in the promotion, and Nijem is 3-3, but neither of them have really beaten any good opponents. I think the only opponent either one of them has beaten was Nijem beating Joe Proctor, and the only opponent that either one of them has beaten that's still in the UFC was Joe Proctor. That's what I was trying to say. Mm-hmm. And even then, Proctor hasn't been overly impressive in his UFC career either. So I think that it's pretty fair where the line is set here. Nijem at minus 150, Edwards plus 130. I really don't want to touch this fight because it could go a whole lot of different ways. I could either see Edwards getting that guillotine of his early, I could see him knocking out Nijem early, or if either of those things don't happen, he doesn't have the greatest gas tank. Nijem's pretty solid with his grappling once it gets to the later rounds, so I could see Nijem taking over and winning on points. So I don't really like a side. I don't really like the over or the under on this fight. This is one that I think I'm just going to be avoiding at all costs. What do you think, Gabe?
I agree with everything you said 100%. This is a fight to avoid completely.
Yeah, sometimes it's just not worth it. We do our best to find value in as many fights as we can, but there's some where there's just too many unknowns, too many different factors that come into play. So Edwards Nijem, definitely one of those cases, at least in our books. And some other people elsewhere might lean a little bit differently, but I'm not comfortable with it. Moving up to the main card, which is also on Fox Sports 1, and because this is on Wednesday evening, the main card is actually starting at 7 p.m., so a little bit of an early card. 7 p.m. for the Eastern folk, 4 p.m. if you're out Gabe's way, so it's a little bit of a matinee for the West Coast, and some good evening fare for us on the East Coast. But kicking off the main card is a featherweight bout, and Gabe, this is one of the fights that I've been eyeing for a bet since I saw the lines come out at a couple different outlets. This bout is between Cole Miller and Sam Cecilia. Cole Miller is... Where's his record? There we go. Cole Miller is 20-8 in his MMA career. Sam Sicilia is 12-3. And both guys are coming off wins in their previous UFC fights. Miller over Andy Ogle and Sam Sicilia over Godofredo Pepe, who, in my eyes, is actually a pretty similar style matchup as Miller. And Gabe, I'll let you go first because I know you had an article that was up at MMA Oddsbreaker about this fight. So what's your take on this one?
Yeah, man, I really like Cole Miller here. While it is a similar stylistic matchup, Miller has a better chin. He's not going to be knocked out like that, and he's going to be more aggressive with his offensive grappling, I think. But he doesn't always have a great fight IQ. But I'm hoping he's going to pursue offensive jiu-jitsu and try to get a submission early, which should be his game plan. Cecilia has. When he was on the Ultimate Fighter, he wasn't that great, but since the show, he's been improving from fight to fight, and winning fights he technically should have been losing, but I think he just bounced off a pair of losses. I think he lost to Maximo Blanco, but he's going to suffer another loss here, I think, against Miller, because the fights. He should have lost it like against Marcelo. Marcelo gassed and he got the knockout. I don't think Miller's going to gas like that, and he doesn't have a glass chin. He's not going to be put out easily. I think it's a good gimme matchup for Miller to get a win in front of his hometown crowd.
All right. I'm actually on the other side of this fight. I think that Cecilia is going to take home the victory here, and I think at plus 160, he's actually worth a play. I know I'm going to be making a play on him, probably at least 2 units, but I haven't exactly decided the size of that play yet. The reason for that is, as you said, Cole Miller doesn't have a glass chin, but he's definitely susceptible to getting cracked with punches and rocked, even if he doesn't go out. And I think that Cecilia is going to be a little bit faster on the feet, even though I wouldn't necessarily characterize him as a fast guy. Cole Miller just seems, especially on the feet, like he's a little bit listless when he's down at featherweight. So unless he comes out and fights exactly like you said, where he's really aggressive, he comes forward, looks to get the takedown and implement his offensive grappling right away, I think that Cecilia is going to be able to wear him down a little bit to the body, maybe land a big shot upstairs, and even if Cecilia decides to take this to the ground, we saw against Pepe, who is pretty aggressive from his back as well, just like Cole, that he can do good damage from somebody's guard. So I wouldn't be shocked to see Cecilia win this fight by KO standing, win it by decision, sort of wear Cole down. We saw that Andy Ogle was able to wear Miller down a little bit in their fight. Or I can see him just get a decision by keeping on the feet or getting top control and avoiding subs. Although if I was in his corner, I wouldn't necessarily encourage him to jump into Cole Miller's guard. So a little bit of dissension here between Gabe and myself. I do like Cecilia for the play. As we said, Gabe's already posted an article on MMA Oddsbreaker, so go take a look at that and see his reasoning for making the play on Cole Miller. Next fight on the card is one that I'm most excited for of all the fights that are on this card, and I'm glad it got promoted from the prelims up to the main card. And that is between John Moraga and Dustin Ortiz. Obviously, Moraga is a former UFC flyweight title challenger, and this is actually going to be his first fight since challenging for the title. So he's had a 6-month layoff, so nothing huge, but he's been out of the cage for a little while. And he is 13-2 in his MMA career. The only other loss coming to John Dodson a little bit earlier in his career. So a nice resume that Moraga's built. On the other side, Dustin Ortiz is 12-2. He is also coming off he is coming off a victory in his last fight over Jose Maria Tomei, and that was by third round TKO, which sort of outlined one of Ortiz's better traits, which is his cardio. And this fight right now, it's got some pretty pretty long odds, which I didn't expect when I was breaking the fight down from an actual skill perspective. But based on Moraga being a former title challenger, having some public hype behind him, it definitely makes sense from that perspective. So Moraga is minus 280 as the favorite. Ortiz is plus 240. Which side are you on this one, Gabe?
Yeah, I'm with John Moraga, and I agree about the line. While I personally had him capped at 280, and he was released at 280, but I was expecting to get him at like minus 180. I was hoping to get a better line on him, but the line I'm getting is fair. I don't know if I should make a play on it, because when I make plays, I usually like to get some value on it. I think Zalman wrestling is better, hits a lot harder, striking is better, has good submission defense, so I'm not worried there. I think he wins, but I don't know if I want to lay minus 280.
Yeah, I definitely think that the line here is too steep, and I did expect it to be, because I do think this fight is fairly competitive, as you were saying, in terms of how they break down. I do give Moraga some edges. He's definitely got more power. I think that he is the better wrestler, although I don't think that his wrestling is going to be good enough that he can just take Ortiz down at will. I do, however, disagree a little bit about him being the better striker, especially if these guys stay at range. You know, we saw with Moraga that I thought that he was personally losing the striking to Chris Carriasso. So
I wouldn't say Carriasso's a pretty good kickboxer, but I wouldn't say he's the better striker in this fight. But he definitely hits harder, and if any, has a better chance of getting the knockout.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think he's definitely got more power than Ortiz, but I think Moraga's best choice, or best chance to win this fight, is to sort of implement the same game plan that Ian McCall did when he fought Dustin Ortiz back in the Tachi Palace days. And that's sort of get in tight, try and go for takedowns. You know, Ortiz he's got pretty good takedown defense, he's a good scrambler, so I don't think that Moraga is going to be able to control him on the ground. But if this fight is just fought at striking range, it's going to be very, very competitive. And based on how quick these flyweights move, the fact that judges suck, I wouldn't be shocked to see Ortiz actually pick up a decision if this just turns into a 15-minute kickboxing fight. So at plus 240, I'm not willing to play him, but if the public starts to go crazy on John Moraga and starts parlaying him and he gets up to 350 or something like that, then I might have to look at least throwing Dustin Ortiz in a round robin, but making some sort of play on him, because this is another one of those flyweight fights that is very competitive, and right now the line just doesn't show it.
Would you take Ortiz straight or by decision? I'd personally take the decision prop.
Yeah, I would imagine that he's probably going to win by decision, but depending on where the line sits, if it's at, let's say, plus 600 or something like that for the straight line, then I'll probably just take that rather than worrying about something crazy happening during the fight, because Ortiz has shown that he can finish people in the past. So Moraga has shown a good chin, but you never know when somebody's going to be able to crack it.
Exactly.
Next fight that we've got is back up to the middleweight division, and it is between Yoel Romero and Derek Brunson. Romero, another guy who came over from Strikeforce. Actually, both of these guys came over from Strikeforce. He has a 6-1 record. Brunson is 11-2. And this is another fight where we've got pretty decent favorites. Yoel Romero is minus 280, so we've got the same line as in that Moraga-Ortiz fight. Brunson is plus 240. What are you thinking about this one, Gabe?
Yo, what? Romero! I love you well, baby.
I have to agree with you in this one. I definitely have to agree with that.
I was hoping for a better line, but 300 minus 300 is worth it too.
Yeah, Romero is one of the guys that, it doesn't really show up. I've seen some articles looking at him on Fight Metric. He doesn't look very impressive. Reed actually sent out an email a little bit earlier about how some of the stats break down for the Fight Night 35 card, and he said there's upset potential with Brunson, and I think this is a fight where on paper that might be the case, but when you look at these guys in the cage, Romero is a much more fluid striker, a much more powerful striker. He's a better wrestler, although he doesn't choose to use his wrestling, and I think that he's going to be able to stop Brunson from controlling him, and in the end, both these guys don't have the greatest cardio in the world.
Yeah, even though Romero's older, I think his cardio is slightly better than Brunson's.
Yeah, his cardio actually looks like it's been getting a little bit better too, whereas Brunson, he's never really impressed me with his cardio. Obviously, the Chris Lieben fight, that was on short notice for him, so hard to give him too much flack about that one, but even prior to that, he hasn't shown the greatest cardio in the world, so I do like Romero to get the knockout here. I think that he's going to be able to finish Brunson fairly early on because Brunson he's not all that comfortable on the feet despite landing a high kick in his last fight, which seems to have gained him a little bit more respect than I think his striking really deserves.
Yeah.
Anything else you wanted to add about that fight?
No, I agree with you. I'm expecting Romero to go in there, get it done, expecting a finish probably in the first round.
Yeah, so he's just got incredible power, really good boxing combinations, and every now and then he'll throw in a flying knee or something like that, just to spice things up a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Next fight that we've got, and it is one of two fights on the card that features two top 10 opponents, or fighters going against each other. That is between TJ Dillashaw and Mike Easton. TJ Dillashaw is 8-2 in his MMA career. Mike Easton is 13-3. Both these guys do have a common opponent in Rafael Assunção. They both lost to Assunção, although a lot of people scored Dillashaw's fight in his favor. Whereas people pretty much agree that Assunção beat Easton fairly clearly.
Yeah.
If we're looking at the odds for this fight, I think that this line is too high for TJ Dillashaw. I think this is going to be a competitive fight. I think in terms of skills, these guys match up pretty well. But the line right now is minus 270 for Dillashaw and plus 230 for Easton. Do you think that's too high, or do you agree with where that is?
I was expecting a better line on Dillashaw, but I agree with the line. I expect the rounds to be fairly close, especially the first round. Or Easton could probably win the first round, maybe, but I don't see him winning 2 rounds, especially because usually after the first round he slows down quite a bit, and I don't think he can really do anything to Dillashaw, especially for 2 rounds. I think Dillashaw can easily win 2 rounds. Maybe not dominate them, but clearly edge them out. He's not going to get taken down. He's not going to get submitted. He could get outstruck possibly, but I don't think so. I think he's smart enough and fast enough, has better conditioning to at least win the second and the third if he drops the first.
Yeah, I think the biggest determining factor in this fight is that Dillashaw is going to come in there and he's going to be a whole lot more active than Easton is. We've seen in the past that Easton can be a little bit prone to just sitting there and not doing a whole lot in fights. And he's gotten away with it because he does have a really good skill set. But I think against a guy like TJ Dillashaw that if he isn't very active, then it's going to be a lot of trouble for him. So Dillashaw is not going to be like Brad Pickett, who's just sort of marching forward and giving Easton opportunities to hit him. He's going to stick and move a little bit more, and I think that he's going to win a decision in this fight, but I think at this line, it's just too much juice to lay on a guy who, he's a little bit chinny. He still doesn't have great striking defense, and we've seen that Easton does have some power. So, Easton could crack his chin. I don't expect it, but it's enough in this fight to at least keep me off of parlaying Dillashaw, although that's probably what a lot of people are going to do, and at the same time, I can't really fault them for doing that.
Yeah, I'm going to parlay him straight and then play him by decision.
Yeah, I think the decision is the way to go for either guy, actually, because looking at that prop right now, the over 2.5 is minus 215. So if you're looking at getting Dillashaw by decision, you might be able to get that at even money, maybe a little bit of plus money, plus 120 or something like that. Who knows where that line's going to come out, because TJ has proven to be a pretty good finisher through most of his career, and usually when they make those prop lines, they just sort of pull up how many finishes a guy has and base it on that. Next fight that we've got, the co-main event of the evening, is a middleweight bout between Lorenz Larkin and Brad Tavares. Larkin is 14-1 in his MMA career, and he's also got the no contest against King Mo, which was a loss, but obviously got wiped out from his records. Brad Tavares is 11-1 in his MMA career. So, pretty interesting matchup between two middleweights that I feel like are on a pretty good rise right now. And looking at this line, again, it's a little bit higher than you might expect from this being such a competitive fight. Larkin is a minus 220 favorite, and Tavares is plus 180. Whereas, I do give Larkin an edge here. I think he's probably going to win a decision, but I think this line should be a little bit tighter than where it's currently sitting. I think that, Tavares is coming off a little bit of a rough performance against Bubba McDaniel, and that's probably lost him a little bit of respect in the public's eye, but he's still a good fighter. He's still going to be a guy who's going to come forwards, push the pace, and we've seen that Larkin can sort of go backwards, get himself pushed up against the cage, and be a little bit aimless in there if somebody really comes in and puts it on him. What are you thinking about this one, Gabe?
Yeah, I think that's what's going to happen. Larkin's going to try to keep his distance, try to outstrike Tavares there. Tavares is going to try to push him up against the fence, try to beat him up there. I agree with you about the line. I wasn't expecting Larkin to be such a big favorite. I definitely see upset potential in Tavares, but I'm definitely leaning Larkin to win a decision here. But the play I like is the over 2.5 rounds for minus 175 instead of Larkin minus 220, because it's less juice. Plus, in case Tavares ends up getting the upset, he still cashes. There's a chance one of these guys could score a knockout because they both hit hard, but they're both very durable, and I think way more often than not, this fight goes the distance.
Yeah, I really agree with that. Looking at just their records quickly, the last guy that Brad Tavares finished, and the only guy that he finished in the UFC, was Phil Baroni, and that was back right at the start of 2011. So we're going on 3 years since he's finished somebody. The last fight that Lorenz Larkin finished by TK, or the last fight that he finished was against Scott Lighty back in April of 2011. So it's almost going on 3 years for him as well. So, that is definitely a line that I'm going to be playing, that over 2.5. Obviously, it would be nice. It'll be nice to see what the fight goes the distance is when that comes out. But to me, I think that this line is going to increase by fight time. So I'm probably going to start up an open parlay or something like that with the over 2.5, and just wait to see where some of the other lines go in between now and Wednesday, but that's definitely something I don't want to miss out on that line.
Let me say this, the over 2.5 rounds is most likely going to cash, but I think we're definitely going to have to sweat it out.
Yeah, there could be some solid strikes landed, especially from Lorenz Larkin's side, I would imagine. But I do think that Tavares is tough enough to be able to take those shots.
Yeah, that's what I'm counting on both ends.
Yeah. Last fight of the evening, the main event between Luke Rockhold and Costa Filipovic. This is in the middleweight division. Rockhold is really looking to rebound from that devastating knockout at the hands of Vitor Belfort. Well, Filipovic is looking to rebound from just really a poor performance against Francis Carmont, where he could never get any offense going. So,
do you really want to see him in a main event after that awful performance?
I don't, but that's the nature of the UFC these days. We're going to see guys who, under other circumstances, wouldn't deserve to be in main events who are put there. So, I'm okay with it because personally, I really like seeing 5-round fights. I much prefer 5-round fights to 3-round fights, and the more of them that we can get, the better. And, you know, one of the things that we get with all of these increased cards is more 5-round fights. You know, people might have said the same thing about Tarek Safadine and Hyungyu Lim. You know, do we really need to see these guys fight for 5 rounds? And the 4th and 5th round turned out to be the best part of that fight. So maybe we'll get something like that happen here. Who knows? But looking at this fight, Rockhold is 10-2, Costa Filipovic is 12-3, and this is the longest line on the cards. Luke Rockhold is a minus 390 favorite. Filipovic is plus 320. So even though Rockhold opened at minus 405, there's actually been a little bit more money that's come in on him than Costa Filipovic. Lines have tightened up a little bit since that time, but it seems like this is going to stick around right near 4-1. And looking at how these guys break down, I think that's fair. I see Costa having the opportunity to, you know, maybe land that knockout punch. But other than that, Rockhold's going to be the busier fighter. He's the better overall fighter on the feet. He's better on the ground. He's got better wrestling. So I really like Luke Rockhold in here, and he's probably going to be the guy that I'm parlaying with Al Oskilic, although I haven't decided that 100% yet.
Yeah, I really like Rockhold here too, and I also really like the over 2.5 rounds total at minus 180. I think I don't think he's going to finish Filipovic early on. If he finishes him, it's probably going to be like the 4th round, TKO, something like that. But there's a good chance the fight could go to distance, Rockhold winning like 50-45, 49-46, something like that. That's what I most likely think happens, because Filipuvic's not easy to finish. Pretty tough guy. But yeah,
Filipuvic's never been finished, and I could really see this resembling Rockhold's fights with Tim Kennedy or Jacare from Strikeforce, except a little bit more one-sided towards Rockhold. Both of those are pretty competitive. Yeah,
like a coming out party type of fight for Rockhold after that devastating knockout.
Yeah, so I think he's another one of those fighters that is better in 5-round fights than he is in 3-round fights. So I think being in the main event here really suits him, and you know, even if it's competitive early on, if Costa's landing some good shots, I think that rounds 3, 4, 5 are definitely going to be Luke Rockhold's.
And if I get a Rockhold by decision at dog odds, I'd probably take that.
Yeah, I can definitely see that one coming through because, you know, looking back at his career, he's got a lot of submission victories, but he hasn't really finished the top fighters that he's faced. Obviously, we just mentioned Kennedy and Jacare. Those are the 2 best fighters that he's taken on, and he went 25 minutes against both of those guys. So I wouldn't be shocked to see this fight go 25 minutes either.
Yeah, me either, but I see the best chance of him getting a finish is if it goes to like the 4th round or something, and Costa's like really tired and just really can't go on, just can't answer to the shots, you know what I mean, against the cage, and then just the ref just steps in. I could see it stopping like that if his cardio's not ready for a 5-round fight, but if it is, definitely I favor going to distance.
Yeah, I would actually think that if there's going to be a stoppage in this fight on Rockhold's side, that it's actually going to be more likely to be a submission than a TKO. He's pretty good at taking the back and getting the rear naked choke. That was really how he started out and made a name for himself in Strikeforce. He was just choking out everybody. So I'd imagine that if there is a finish here, that he's probably going to revert to that, and maybe the Rockhold by submission prop is something that's really juicy, because we've seen that Costa's ground game really isn't anything to write home about, so could be something to look out for.
Yeah, especially later in the fight when he's tired, I could see a rear naked choke happening.
Yep. What do you think about, for people who are playing Costa Filipu in this fight, do you think there's any other way to play him than either by TKO or in round 1?
I wouldn't play him in round 1. I guess maybe by TKO, but not. If he wins by knockout, I don't see why it couldn't come in the 2nd round. So I wouldn't take the 1st round prop. If you think that's going to happen, I'd say just take the knockout instead of round 1, because you don't know.
Yeah, the only reason that for those people I would lean towards round 1 is, as I said, Rockhold is a fighter who gets stronger as the fight goes on, and both of his previous losses have been 1st round TKOs, so I think that Costa's best chance is to catch him early and put him away early, but I can definitely see what you're saying. He's gonna still carry that power with him through the 2nd and 3rd round, but before it really starts to fade, and the chance of the knockout really goes out the window.
Yeah, exactly.
Alright, so that does it for our UFC Fight Night 35 preview. I took a look at all the fights. As I said, keep an eye on MMA Oddsbreaker. Gabe, are you going to have any more picks articles coming out for the rest of the week?
Yeah, I'm going to have quite a few on the way.
Perfect, so keep an eye out for those. Obviously, we did have the lines that came out a little bit earlier today for the prelim fights. Main card lines were 2 days ago, I believe. So go back and search through the archives at Oddsbreaker, and you can see my thoughts on the opening lines and really what I expected to come out in these fights. And obviously, I just gave you some perspective in terms of some plays that I'm looking at. For me, you can follow me on Twitter at Brad Taschuk, and when it comes to either fight day or the Tuesday evening before, I'll tweet out what some of my final plays are. The podcast is at Odds MMA, and Gabe is at Gabe Killian MMA. Before we get out of here, we're going to go back and give you our fight to go see. So for this week, Gabe, what's a fight that you think the listeners should go take a look at?
Mike Easton versus Jared Papazian, one of my favorite bantamweight fights of all time. Papazian was coming on short notice, fighting Easton, and it was a fight of the night worthy fight. I think it was robbed of the event that night. Pat Berry versus Christopher, what was his name? Something.
Oh, Christian Moorcraft.
Yeah, Christian Moorcraft. Yeah, that fight took home the award, which I think robbed Papazian versus Easton, which that was an incredible fight, I thought.
Yeah, I remember that fight. Surprised that there was a draw scorecard in that fight, I believe. But it was much more competitive than people expected. I think Easton was a fairly big favorite going into that fight. Mm-hmm. But Papazian, that was probably his best performance, if not ever, then definitely in the UFC.
Yeah, because someone was standing with him instead of trying to take him down.
Yeah, exactly. I just looked it up on Best Fight Odds, and Mike Easton closed as a minus 430 favorite in that fight. So, anybody who was on Papazian was probably hoping that scorecards would come through in his favor. Unfortunately, it didn't go that way, but still an entertaining fight nonetheless.
Mm-hmm.
For me, the fight that I'm going to have everybody go and take a look at, just when I was going through and doing tape study for some of these fighters, the most recent fight that Luis Smolka had, which was against a guy named Ali Kali, no, I'm not making that up, over in PXC. It was a flyweight title fight, the first time that he dropped down to 125, and it's just a fun little fight. You see some of the good things about Smolka, some of the bad things about him. You know, he looks a little bit more comfortable with his striking than he did in previous fights. You can see how he really likes to go for Bravo chokes and things like that whenever he gets a chance to put those long arms to use. But you can also see that, you know, defensively, he can get hit. I think he can get hurt to the body in the fight against Oskilic. And, you know, just a fun little back and forth fight with Smolka taking on, as I said, Ali Kali, one of the finer names in MMA. So go check that one out from PXC 41. You can find that one on YouTube.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch tape on Smolka today, so I'll check that fight out. So, but you're not really impressed with that guy, huh?
Not too impressed by him.
I haven't watched the tape yet, but I was hoping I'd be impressed because I want to find a good spot to fade Alpekinen because I think eventually he's gonna lose to a dog in an upset. I don't think he's that great. I think he's overhyped. But I was hoping this would be a good spot to fade him, but we'll see about that.
Yeah, I don't think it is. As I was saying, Smolka, he kind of reminds me of Will Chope in that the fact that he's so tall is one of his best assets. He's got really long arms, long legs. That allows him to find submissions in places that other guys couldn't.
Does he use his reach well, or like Will Chope, who didn't use his reach well? No. I don't get these guys.
I think that's going to be one of the things that really hurts him against Oskilic, because Oskilic is a better striker. He's got a bit of power. I think he can get in and crack Smolka a little bit to the body, maybe even finish him off that way. Because in that fight, he actually got hurt. This guy that I'm talking about, Ali Kali, he's like all of 5'3", and I think his arms are about a foot long. And at points when he was able to get inside on Smolka, he did some pretty good damage to him. So that definitely worries me about Smolka. But enough about that. You guys can go check that fight out, draw your own conclusions on it, and you know, if you think I'm wrong, hit me up on Twitter and tell me that I'm an idiot. But other than that, anything you wanted to add before we get out of here, Gabe?
Yeah, man, I wish Justin Scoggins was on this card. He asked to be on it, but they gave Oskilic a fight instead of Scoggins, which I didn't get at all. Yeah,
maybe there's an injury or something going on there, because you definitely think that they would want to cater this card to the home crowd a little bit.
Yeah, especially after he asked to be on this card, and then Oskilic made his debut a week after Scoggins, and he got on the card Scoggins was asking to be on. So it doesn't make sense unless he's injured.
Yeah, so I wouldn't necessarily like to see a matchup between Oskilic and Scoggins yet, but even still, I think that would be a pretty good fight to put on this card. Oh well, though, it's not happening. Hopefully we do get to see Justin Scoggins soon, though, because I was very, very impressed by him in his UFC debut.
Me too.
That does it for this week's edition of the At Odds MMA show. Next week is going to be a little bit weird because of the fight card coming up on Wednesday. So we're probably not going to have another show for you until we preview the next UFC on Fox card the following week. So keep an eye out for that, and we'll make sure that we keep you guys up to date. Until then, enjoy the fights and go make yourself some money.